Welcome to a special edition of Why Should We Care About the Indo-Pacific? I'm Ray Powell, and Jim Caruso is not here. I am free, but I am joined in this very special edition here in Manila at the Diamond Hotel by Senator Risa Hontiveros. She has been in the Senate since 2016, but this past year, especially since about March of this year, has been especially prolific for her public appearances because she has been investigating a really fascinating case that erupted here in March with the police raid on a Philippine Offshore Gaming Organization site in Bamban Tarlac. And that has turned into the story that just gets weirder and more fascinating and more disturbing all the time. So, Senator, welcome. Welcome to your own country.
Welcome to my country.
Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Can you tell me, why should people care about POGOs?
People should care about POGOs because they have spawned an unbroken line of social and economic and now apparently political problems. From at least 8 years ago, the previous administration under Duterte, they soon became implicated in crimes like prostitution, illegal recruitment and detention. A long period that my Senate Committee on Women was investigating them for what was called here in the Philippines the Pastilla scam, a bribery scam at the Bureau of Immigration to allow Chinese POGO employees illegally to work in the country. And in this most recent incarnation of the POGOs, we found that they're all tied up with crimes like human trafficking, cyber scamming, money laundering, possibly espionage. The jury's still out on that one. And most recently, the commodification of Philippine citizenship in order to set up POGOs and use them as a cover for various money-making crimes.
This is okay. So we're going to have to go through and unpack all of this because this is really a web. So let's start with just the basic foundational question:
Yes.
What is a POGO?
So a POGO is not our toy when we were kids, but the Philippine Offshore Gaming Operations. They actually started out of China, but right off the bat or soon enough were at least officially declared illegal there. They found safe haven in Cambodia, also a close ally to China, and in the rest of the Mekong region, so much so that until today, the UN Office of Drugs and Crime is still most concerned about the Mekong River area as far as POGOs go. But when POGOs were closed down, particularly in Cambodia, many of them came here around the time that Duterte was president and had Malacanang now as his new, Malacanang Palace, as his new platform, the Office of the President, to give his longtime mainland Chinese business partners who'd been with him since he was mayor in Davao City in southern Philippines, to give them now a bigger playground to play in. And Duterte's time was practically the time for a no holds barred or an open door policy towards POGOs. So soon enough, even during the pandemic years, we were hearing all about these POGOs and how they became hubs not only of online gambling, targeting participants in mainland China as well, but later on, various forms of scams, targeting now a lot of people in the West, the United States, Europe, and elsewhere. So just bad news all around ever since.
So you mentioned that it started in other countries. Obviously, when it was in Cambodia, it wasn't a POGO since it wasn't a Philippine gaming operation. But it was germinated there. And who was behind it? Do we know who was behind these POGOs?
They had a sort of hub there, which was called Sihanoukville. And the chatter on the street was, it was really the head of state there, a close ally himself of Xi Jinping, who was the boss in that hub. But when finally his close ally in Beijing said, put a stop to that, many of them migrated here.
So that's interesting because, of course, we tend to think that everything that happens in China is run sort of out of Xi Jinping's central command center, where he pulls all the levers and says, push the POGOs out, But you've said that this may be happening sort of against Beijing's wishes. Do we know that, or is that?
Against Beijing's wishes officially, because I've also been reading studies made about POGO-like operations in other countries that have the theory that the Chinese government or the Chinese Communist Party actually works in tandem with criminal groups and criminal families when it suits them, and then cracks down on them when they think that tactic will suit their party or government better.
So let's get to Mayor Alice Guo. Who is she? I'll ask this question: Where did she come from? I'm not sure we know the answer to that. And why has she become so important to this story?
She became important because when the PAOK, the Presidential Anti-Crime Commission, raided that one of the most recent POGO hubs in Bamban, Tarlac. So this was her local government unit. She's the mayor there. But they also found evidence on site, documentary evidence, that not only had she been the authorized representative of Hong Sheng, which applied for a letter of no objection to construct a POGO hub there, but she hadn't divested herself of involvement in the POGO hub. PAOK found documents on site that she continued to pay the electricity bills. She was paying the wages of the maintenance employees there. So we got curious about her and trying to get to know more about her, and especially after her mysterious statements at the first hearing that she attended, we continued to dig deeper. And there we found that her Filipino citizenship, which allowed her to run for mayor in the first place, was under question. We later found out, and with the sleuthing of the National Bureau of Investigation, that her fingerprints, when she had applied for an NBI clearance,
National Bureau of Investigation,
National Bureau of Investigation, 100% matched with the fingerprints of a Chinese minor named Guo Huaping, who had been listed by her mother, Lin Wenyi, as a dependent when the mother applied a decade before for a special investor's resident visa. And we also found with further research that both her parents are not Filipino citizens either. They are Chinese citizens. And both are mentioned many times as co-incorporators in her various businesses. So we got not less and less, but more and more curious about her as our fact-finding and as the hearings went on. And the latest is now not even her shadow can be seen after she was absent from a couple of hearings. We subpoenaed her and her family members and close associates. They ignored that as well. So now they are about 8 of them subject of a citation in contempt and therefore a warrant of arrest. But not even her shadow can be seen. So I can't be sure that she's still in the country.
Oh. Yeah. So I seem to recall at the beginning of this thing that there was a discussion about how she grew up in the Philippines, right? And there was a story about that involved pig farming, was it?
That's right, pig farming.
And then through the process of the investigation, it turns out that she owned a number of luxury vehicles and a helicopter.
And a helicopter.
So, and of course, one of the things that's so interesting about this is she was able to demonstrate Filipino citizen based on an amended birth certificate. Is that correct? So what are these amended birth certificates, and what is the issue with them?
Her father applied for a late registration of live birth when she was about 19 years old. He did it through one of the local registrar's offices of the National Statistical Administration, Civil Registrar's Office. But he was supposed to submit several documents. He submitted only one, and late. He should have submitted the documents first and then been issued the late registration of live birth. He got the late registration first of all, and then submitted late only one document. And even that late registration of live birth, the Philippine Statistical Authority said in one of our hearings that it's an irregular birth certificate. The same for the brother of Mayor Alice Guo, or whom we now know as Guo Huaping. So the National Statistical Administration recommended to the Office of the Solicitor General to cancel these irregular birth certificates. And the Office of the Solicitor General said they would accelerate that process. That has set into motion a sort of domino effect among other government agencies, some of which started coordinating with each other even while we were investigating, and we still are investigating this POGO hub in Banban and Mayor Alice Guo. The Office of the Solicitor General said they are also filing a case of quo warranto against her to remove her as mayor, as if to say that since she was not qualified after all, she should never have been able to file a certificate of candidacy, run, and now govern as mayor.
So, okay, so we certainly have strong evidence of a political official's involvement in a criminal organization. We assume this POGO, this particular POGO, and maybe other POGOs are being run by some kind of a Chinese origin criminal organization, syndicate. We have some evidence that there has been corruption in the process of issuing these birth certificates. We don't really know why Alice Guo was put into this position. Was she planted there by someone to grow up in the political system and gain influence? Now she's a mayor of a small city, but eventually she could be mayor of a big city or a governor or something more. So what is, when you take a step back at this whole situation, I mean, we seem to have gone far beyond a local crime story.
Yes, it seems so. Also because when we did the ocular inspection of the POGO hub in Bamban and began hearing and seeing these disturbing facts about Mayor Alice Guo, making us want to investigate her more, the other thing that came up was the possibility that there was surveillance of Philippine government communications from Bamban, and the possibility also that there was hacking of Philippine government websites emanating from Bamban. That's why the angle of possible espionage arose. And as far as I know, our intelligence agencies are still investigating that. If that should be established, then it would tell me that it wasn't unreasonable of us to start asking, how did she get here in the first place? Was she planted? Was it a Chinese government project? Was it a Chinese criminal syndicate project? Was it both? And that's very important for us to try to understand well, because Bamban is not the only place that there are POGO hubs in the Philippines. And if such malign actors were at work in her case, as you mentioned, what's to stop them from doing it in other parts of the Philippines or going even higher in government?
So let's explore that. How many POGO sites are there in the Philippines? Do we know?
We don't even know the exact number. What we know for sure is that under the previous administration, the Philippine Amusement and Gaming Corporation issued around 298 licenses to POGO companies. Yeah. Since then, they've suspended about 250 plus, leaving about 40 plus still in operation. Apparently, most, if not all of those 250 plus, which were suspended, did not or were not able to renew their license. And so for a while, earlier in this investigation, it was fashionable for some in the executive to say, oh, there's a difference between legal POGOs and illegal POGOs. But as we've been holding the hearings, we've had to say, it's like there's no difference anymore. Because even those which, many of those which started as legal or, with a valid license issued by the Philippine Amusement and Gaming Corporation, as raids have shown, as investigations have shown, various criminal activities and scams of various forms have taken refuge under the cover of POGO. And now, in the case of Bamban, apparently under the cover of a mayoral term.
Yeah. So you mentioned human trafficking.
Yes.
In the raid on the POGO in Bamban, I seem to recall there were upwards of 400 people who were working there, and maybe about 160 or so from China,
Yes.
but then a number from other countries
Yes.
that appeared to perhaps have been trafficked. Is that fair?
Yes. There was at least one Malaysian worker there who was rescued during the raid because the Malaysian embassy in the Philippines had to ask our Philippine authorities to help him, to rescue him. There was also at least one Vietnamese.
He was the one who
escaped.
blew the whistle, right?
He blew the whistle.
Yep.
Oh, wow. His experience was so harrowing. He escaped over the back wall. And a good Samaritan, a Filipino who had been an employee of the U.S. here, our military here, took him, gave him sanctuary. He stayed there, this Vietnamese stayed there for several days. He had been almost suicidal, escaping. He showed he took selfie videos of his escape. And while he was there a few days in the house of the Good Samaritan, security personnel from the Bamban POGO hub came and reportedly even some personnel of the Philippine National Police, convincing him to leave the country. One or the other of them were offering him a plane ticket, but also offering an affidavit of desistance for him to sign.
Wow.
So it really didn't look good at all. And so these people complained of maltreatment when they wouldn't reach their quotas in their scam operations. And then when you look at the human trafficking victim survivors in the next POGO hub that was raided by the Philippine Presidential Anti-Organized Crime Commission, the one in Porac, Pampanga, even more horrific stories of abuse and ill treatment, prostitution, torture, really, really terrible. So it doesn't get better, it gets worse as each new POGO hub is raided.
So taking a step back and looking at the question this raises about foreign interference in the Philippines, so we can see the potential for, as we said, espionage. We see the potential for interfering in local politics. What have you been learning about the extent of foreign interference as it applies to the Philippines?
A lot, too much. So we are facing China not only possibly on land in the POGOs, previously still on land. We are contending with her in our national electricity or power grid. We're contending with her.
Tell me about that.
This is the the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines, in which China has a 40% stake, but also even in the Philippine-owned 60% stake, which is the minimum required by our constitution. It seems that Chinese state-owned enterprises also have a stake in that 60% majority Filipino share. And in hearings, even in the previous Congress, at the Senate, I actually got to ask, so could China theoretically close the switch on our lights in our house, here in our national house? And some resource person said yes. So that's one. China is also in our telecoms industry because when we tried to open up what some call the duopoly of just two major Philippine telecoms companies, what came in was a company, Dito, which for our research was also majority China owned. And of course, off land, we are contending with China in the West Philippine Sea.
Right. Yeah. So now, when we think about foreign direct investment, we generally think of that in a capitalist society. We think that's actually a good thing.
Yes.
Right? Because it brings in resources. Obviously, it helps us
Yes.
develop our economy. Yes. But you're concerned that this kind of foreign direct investment is not actually in the Philippine national interest.
No, it would be against Philippine national interest. While China refuses to recognize our victory at The Hague, while she continues to harass our Navy, Coast Guard, Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, fisherfolk in the West Philippine Sea, while she has destroyed our marine resources and ecosystems, harvesting endangered species in the oceans, destroying corals, and adding insult to injury, using the marine resources she has dredged up from underwater at the seabed to construct artificial islands within the West Philippine Sea and our exclusive economic zone, then militarizing them and using them to claim her territory in our part of the ocean.
So I'm thinking about China's stake in these telecom companies or in the electrical grid. You're looking at China's other activities, yes. its aggression in the West Philippine Sea, and some of its aggressive statements, and saying this is not the country that we want to have this large a stake in our economic life.
For sure. Actually, as an Asian, I can be proud that there's another Asian country that's a regional power who's vying to be one of the global powers. She has achieved so much for her own people economically, although at great social and definitely democracy cost. But Filipinos will not be bullied in our own backyard. And we know from our childhood that even in a playground, if you don't stand up to a bully, he will never respect you.
Yeah. So a lot of, obviously, we're talking about the West Philippine Sea, which is an issue I'm very close to. And a lot of people, I end up occasionally in back and forth with people who have a different view. And their view is, look, under Rodrigo Duterte, this was handled, this was managed, things were quiet. It's only been under this recent, policy of a more assertive stance, obviously the transparency initiative and all of these kinds of things, that now we have all these problems. Why is that not, why doesn't that make sense?
It really doesn't. And it's a trope from China's influence operations, trying to change the opinion environment here, attacking Filipinos who uphold the Philippine national interest, and building up their own spokespersons, even within Philippine society, who echo Beijing's talking points. Even if I'm in the opposition, this is one issue on which I can agree with the president. It is proper to have to raise a more assertive voice for Philippine national interests. Nobody is trying to start a war here, but we have to speak politically and diplomatically for Philippine national interests. We're not interested in being trapped between staying with China or going back alone to the US, but building what I always call a bigger alliance, which is a better alliance. All the countries, all the regional formations that uphold the rule of law at sea, who uphold the uphold the UNCLOS, who uphold our victory under UNCLOS at The Hague, who uphold freedom of navigation, so that together we can compel China to behave, to cease and desist from her unacceptable behavior. During Duterte's time, it was not managed. He committed treason against the Philippines by kowtowing to China, by keeping quiet about all her abuses against Filipinos, by that so-called gentleman's agreement that he kept secret from the Filipino people. That is not correct foreign policy. And there's a world of difference between betraying your own country's national interest as the highest elected official at that time and starting a war, which I don't think any country in the world wants anymore. There's many steps in between that he failed to take. He reneged on his duty to take them. And at least now, the executive is taking some of those necessary steps.
One of the things that has happened in the last 18 months since we began to see all of these really compelling pictures and video coming out of the West Philippine Sea, beginning with the use of laser, through the all of the swarming and blocking, and then water cannons, and all of these things that have happened. We've seen a huge increase in the amount of international support.
Yes.
Both from statements and from some material assistance, right?
Yes.
And now we're seeing these joint patrols and growing, and the supply by Japan of some radars and help with the new Coast Guard ships. Yes. Canada has given dark vessel detection, so there's international support piece. And then the other thing has been, you've seen, or at least I think I've seen, a growing resilience among the Filipino people against this kind of thing. So if we have these civil society groups that rise up and then take these convoys out to sea. But you've also seen through elected representatives a decision to increase the budget for maritime security, to do investigations into Chinese influence. So what do you think has been the most important positive outcome from the Philippines' new determination to sort of show the Philippines and the world what's been happening in the West Philippine Sea?
I think the most positive outcome is that though 6 years late, we're finally picking up the follow-up actions we should have taken after we won at The Hague. Really for the executive to speak out about this as our most powerful political and diplomatic nonviolent weapon. For the legislature also, we started earlier, I'm proud to say, than the executive, to consistently raise our voice about what are the laws we need to pass, like this new maritime zones law, what investigations do we need to conduct, such as my committee is doing now for one, what are the budget interventions that are needed to support the AFP modernization program into the future horizons, to support the self-reliant defense posture program, to strengthen our diplomatic corps, and again, even if I'm in the opposition, to try to contest politics in a way that will strengthen democracy. So, and then there are many things also. For example, in Marites Vitug's epilogue in Rock Solid, Sailing Forward, we still need to do, like, as a maritime nation, to teach this history, not just on land, but in the water as well, to our students at all levels of the educational system, so that future generations of Filipinos can continue to stand up for our national interest in the ocean as well. This desire of Filipinos that China get out of our waters, that our government do more to assert Philippine national interests in the West Philippine Sea. Even the surveys have captured that it's arguably the most unifying issue right now among Filipinos. So we should use that.
Mischief Reef was discovered to have fishermen structures back in 1995. The Sierra Madre was grounded in 1999. In 2012, the Scarborough Shoal incident ended in the loss of Scarborough Shoal effectively to Chinese control. And then, of course, in 2016, there was the arbitral tribunal victory. And yet today, as we talk right now, it feels like the Philippines is still trying to play catch up in its maritime security. It's an archipelagic nation. It is basically, as you say, a maritime nation. Why is it the Philippines is still playing catch up?
Politically, our political leadership has to also catch up in terms of programs, policies, treaties with the Philippines, with the Senate as the treaty-making body. Maybe some important cases filed in our Supreme Court on which the High Court can speak to also add its voice to our governmental institutions, leading the people, partnering with civil society, partnering with the private sector to achieve these outcomes. In our economy, we also need to reflect that we are a maritime nation. Where's our revived shipbuilding industry. There are still a few locations in the Philippines that retain that potential they had of old, that can and should be revived. And earlier I mentioned about what Marites has been advocating. Marites Vito has been advocating, teaching all of these issues and the advocacy in our schools. That has to become part of the popular culture and the civic culture also of Filipinos. So now that we know more keenly that we are lagging behind and we have to catch up, we have to apply ourselves to those tasks.
You have a treaty alliance with the United States for almost 3/4 of a century now. You're a former United States colony.
Yes.
Should the United States be doing more, and what should the United States be doing?
I think more of the joint maritime exercises, naval exercises, are always welcome. I mean, historically, we've always had the balikatan. I want our country to have more of those similar exercises with the other like-minded countries, the other naval powers of the world who are supporting us in pushing back against China. Since we are a former colony of the U.S., we also watch U.S. politics very closely, and together with our
U.S.
own...
politics are boring. Nothing's happening over there.
Oh, there nothing's happening. Well, enough is happening over here that I wish it was more boring and predictable here. But we have our own democracy heartaches and suspenseful moments also. But still, since we have that shared history, we're also looking to pick up whatever best practices or lessons or models we can from the U.S. Not just your government, but your civil society and yes, your private sector too. Earlier we were talking about foreign direct investments in the economic partnerships between our two private sectors. More exploration of the marine-based productive activities that the Philippines can to which the Philippines can bring something to the table. Yeah.
So I could go on forever, but I don't want to take up all of your time. I am interested just sort of to turn this back to this whole case around Alice Guo and the POGOs. You are the chair of the Committee on Women.
Yes.
Are you surprised that you ended up in the middle of this particular story? Because it's this story with tentacles everywhere, and you have sort of become a central feature in it.
I'm really very happy that the Senate Committee on its Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality has, I hope, become so useful and helpful to our main constituencies, even in an issue that seems to have gone beyond what even we expected at the start. And it's because a lot of brave women and even some children, victim survivors, and a lot of brave whistleblowers have come forward in the last 4 years. So it's been 4 years that towards the seeming close of the investigation of the particular issue we were focusing on, I thought we were going to wrap up, but then a new aspect of the POGOs would be brought forward by a whistleblower or a victim survivor. And so we just had to follow the clues. We had to try to perceive the dots and try to connect them. And this has also led us to possibly completing part of the work on an unfinished big investigation also by the Senate in the previous Congress of the Pharmaly scandal. Because it seems in
the Pharmaly scandal.
The Pharmaly scandal was, this was handled at that time by the Blue Ribbon Committee in the Senate. We investigated the irregularly bid, overpriced, and basically irregularly procured pandemic supplies under the Duterte administration. In the latest hearing on the POGO, we started to see that it's the same cast of characters as during the Pharmaly period. That close mainland Chinese associates of Duterte who were raking it in during the Pharmaly operations, they're popping up here in the POGO investigation. So what we were not able to complete in the Farmally investigation, because we've been waiting the last 2 years for what we call a new matter to emerge, a new piece of evidence or a new witness to connect the final dot from Michael Yang, who's a mainland Chinese close associate and former presidential economic advisor of Duterte, to connect the last dot from Michael Yang to Duterte. We weren't able to do that on Farmally. Who knows if we'll be able to do it here in the POGO, because Michael Yang's brother has cropped up in the POGO investigation.
This last 4 months, starting with it feels like a new level of attention, much more intense attention. I feel like I'm constant, since I spend so much time on social media, unfortunately, I feel like I'm constantly seeing you out in public talking about this case, which is such a wild case.
Wow.
Do you feel like this is sort of, has this changed your life in any way? Has this made you busier? Has it made you more of a target? Is it more interesting? How has it been different since then?
It's even more of the same. My team and I, my office and I, have always been targets from the time of Duterte, especially of social media attacks, fake news, trolling, and it's no different now. Maybe an important difference is that in the context also of the conflict that has emerged between the two major factions in government, the Marcos and the Duterte, those forces in a way are now split. One of them is trying to defend Alice Guo et al. The other is also coming onto the anti-POGO bandwagon. And I'm just grateful that in the past weeks, more executive officials have spoken out against POGO as well. The Secretary of Finance, the Director General of the National Economic and Development Authority. Recently, a big group of Philippine business organizations came out to speak against POGO. And so more and more voices are being added to ours in the Senate in the run-up to the State of the Nation address of the President on the 22nd July. So I'm not alone. There are more and more of us Filipinos hoping that maybe one of his announcements during that SONA, that State of the Nation address, will be finally a ban on POGOs in the Philippines.
Wow.
Yeah.
That would be something.
It would.
It's a reason to tune in to the State of the Nation address, and that's on Sunday, is that correct?
On Monday, Philippines, at 3 p.m. Yes, July 22nd.
Well, on that note, Senator Risa Hontiveros, this has really been a great interview. It's really been fascinating for me. This is, again, the first time we've done one of these in person, and I don't think I could have asked for a more interesting topic and a more interesting guest. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much.
And just to our audience and for Jim, sorry you missed it, brother. I'll be seeing you again soon. And for both of us and for Ian, our producer, thanks for joining us on this edition or this episode of Why Should We Care About the Indo-Pacific?